G'day guys, I'm Morgan.
And I'm Nathan, and on today's episode, we're going to be tag teaming these Tritons.
Hey, MR what we got?
Close, I whittled them down, stick it to them by sticking around. The gang online, Iwo Jima got one flag and it's sticking the ground, setting up shop. Think I got the message across. Came for the titles, impressed with the watch. We play at the levels of Letterman jocks. Pins on the jacket, the man's abundant. The point of the road was being and
So the reason that we're doing both of these cars at the same time today is because between the MQ and the MR, the kit is identical, and there is only ever so slight differences between the snorkels themselves. So it made perfect sense to get them both in, get them both done at the same time.
So you might be wondering what basic tools you'll need to fit these kits. Pretty much all we need is an air hacksaw, 32 tooth blade to make sure you can cut through the panel without it reverberating. Die grinder with a flat wheel just to clean up the swarf. 7mm hose clamp tool or a socket and a ratchet. Nutsert gun. On one of our recent videos, we went to Trade Tools and picked up a hand squeeze gun. Those are perfectly good for fitting these kits. We prefer to use these because they give us more purchase on the nutsert. Other tools you may need are 10mm socket, screw gun, and a drill as well. Some basic snips for trimming your pinch weld. You'll also need an air gun or a clean microfiber just to wipe down and remove any swarf or metal shavings off the car once you've completed your cut.
So as usual, we're going to kick off by taping up the guard. While we're at it, we're also going to tape up the A-pillar, pop the bonnet and get started with pulling the engine bay apart. Well, you know what's funny? Out the corner of my eye, I can see you taping and I'm like, tape faster, tape faster.
I'm hoping I'm taping in the right area.
I should have popped the bonnet for you. That would have been very gentlemanly, wouldn't it? So before we cut the guard, we're just going to give you a super quick rundown on the kit. So it comes with a silicon 45-degree joiner, which has already been cut down for you. Now the cut down end goes on the Airbox, as well as this billet machine adapter. So as you can see, that's the shape of the standard inlet on the Airbox, and we need to adapt that to circular so we can put the silicon joiner on it. So we use this billet adapter, and we also supply a pair of Worth worm drive hose clamps, and the kit also comes with
comprehensive fitting instructions. So let's get stuck into pulling the MR apart, and while I'm doing that, Nathan's going to be over there doing the exact same thing to the MQ.
Let's get into it. Actually, Paul, can you come have a look at this for a sec? So, a thing that's very common between both the MR and the MQ is the amount of sand and shit that ends up in the bottom of the Airbox. So this car is fairly new, and you can see that there is a build-up of sand here in the bottom of the base itself. And with how the air filter sits on the 45, it's very easy for it to suck sand through. So this is the MR, it's the newer car. Come have a look in the engine bay of the MQ. So not only is the Snorkel good for if you want to do water crossings, but it's so important for keeping sand out of your Airbox, which more importantly means keeping sand away from your turbo.
So after we've removed the Airbox lid and the filter, block the intake off with your favourite Chobani cup or similar.
There is no similar, it's
no,
nothing, hey?
Just the best. Once you've done that, we'll then remove the 3 M6 bolts that secure the Airbox base. You'll also remove the airflow meter loom from its clip on the intake. After that, we'll move on to removing the washer bottle and this trim piece here, and then you're good to start marking out your template. So also with the Tritons, we've got to cut this inner skin just to allow for space for the silicon to go through. So it's also good practice to remove this loom plug here and just to push it out of the way so there's no risk of actually nicking your loom.
Alright guys, so now that we've got the engine bay apart, we're going to go ahead and mark out the template. So we're going to go ahead and transfer the measurements that are on the template onto the car. What you want to do is you want to end up with a front and a rear reference point. So this way when you cut the template out, it will line up perfectly with these points. If it doesn't line up perfectly, then that way you know you've done something wrong and you either need to remeasure or give us a call. So as you will have noticed guys, we always take the measurement from the back corner of the guard. Now this is something we do in nearly every snorkel kit that we supply because it's a constant point. We also use a small tape measure with a small tongue, because what we've found in the past is that people that use like Stanley Fat Maxes or something, trying to get such a big tongue up in this tight little corner is a little bit of hard work. So it's best to use this nice small tongue. So now that you've got your front and rear points, we're going to go ahead and use some magnets to help hold the template on the car. Just while you're tracing around it, it makes it much easier if you've got something there sort of sticking it there for you. So as you can see, front marks lined up, the back marks lined up. I'm going to go ahead and trace around. What we do to make this as easy as possible is always hold the pen into the template itself. That way it'll just cruise around nice and easily for you. Now with the shape of the guard on the Triton, it is pretty important to contour the template onto it as you are marking it out. Another thing that's super important is that it says in the instructions that you have to cut the inside part out and be left with this. If you cut the inside out and discard that and try and put the outside on the car, it will stretch out, which will make this hole bigger. We've seen it happen before, so make sure you follow the instructions very carefully and only use the inside part of the template. All right, so now that we've got that marked out, we're going to switch over to Morgs and get him to mark out the MR for you.
So with the MR, it's very similar. The one main difference is that this front checkpoint or cross reference point is measured from this corner of the quarter panel underneath the headlight instead of being measured from the back corner, which we usually do.
And the only reason we did that on the MR Triton is because of this curve in the guard, trying to get that point from the front. We found that there was discrepancies in trying to mark it out, so it's much easier and much more
I'd say
precise,
repeatable, yeah.
To be able to pull from that point backwards.
Yeah, just to make it easier for everyone else to do this at home.
Yeah.
So now that we've got our cross-reference points, I'll check that the template lines up with these before we start marking out. It's worth noting that with the contour of this guard, making sure that you press it in all the way into the contour before lining up these marks, because if you just put it straight up like that, it'll end up cutting probably 4 to 5 mil different through this center section and you'll end up with quite a gappy cut.
And one thing you can do if you don't have magnets is get a mate to help you out. So I'll take the front and you take the back.
Okay. Thanks, mate.
No worries.
Also included in your fitting instructions is a bottom of bracket measurement.
This is listed on your template, and that's to make sure that you end up with the snorkel in the exact right spot. There's no guessing, it's perfect every time. So pretty much what we're up to next is to cut the hole in the guard. Now what we start with is a step drill at the back here. As you'll see that the back of the hole is quite tight. To get the air hacksaw around the back of the hole, it sort of struggles a little bit with that tight of a curve. So we step drill it out so that way you can run the air hacksaw up to it, and then it also gives you a point to start with and come back this way. And that will be the same on both vehicles.
One thing to note about both the MQ and MR Tritons is that the factory loom actually runs really close behind this quarter panel here. So when you're drilling or cutting the quarter panel, it's always best to leave the blade as far out as possible so that you're not going to put that blade close to the loom and end up cutting through it. Because we have seen in the past, customers have installed these and they've cut too deep and nicked the loom.
So the best way to make sure you don't end up too deep and cutting through the loom is to use your hand as a stop on the guard. So I'll rest the air hacksaw against my finger there and I'll hold my hand against the guard, and that way it'll stop the air hacksaw from wanting to end up too far in the hole and cutting through the loom. So the MQ has this piece of felt in behind the guard. You can generally turn it sideways and snap it off. Generally. If you can't, just use a pair of side cutters and just cut the clip. All right, so again, we got the piece of felt, same as the last car, just get rid of it. I really wanted just one of them to work out. So as you can see, that was the loom that Morgan was talking about earlier. Now, it's in slightly different positions on either car, but you have to be super careful when you're cutting the hole. If you are concerned about cutting through the loom, which I would be if I was doing this for the first time, what we highly recommend is to pull the inner guard out. We don't, because I mean we've done a few of them now, so we don't really have to, but if it's your first time, pull the inner guard out. You can also remove these clips, flathead screwdriver or a lever bar or anything like that. Remove those clips and then you can pull that loom down and out of the road, so that way you don't have to be worried about cutting through it while you're cutting the hole. So the other thing you've got to do on the Triton is cut the inner structure out to let the snorkel go through. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this out for Morgs, and then he's going to cut that part of the hole. There is pictures in the instructions on how to do that.
So that's the outer skin removed, and then we'll move into the engine bay and cut out the inner skin. It is one thing to note, the inner skins are quite thick, and because of the shape that you've got to cut them to, you will end up chewing through a few blades, so make sure you head down to your local trade tools and pick up a fair few extra blades. So now that we're done cutting the guard holes, we'll use a die grinder with a spiral band bit to clean both inner and outer holes up before we test fit the snorkel. On your boss. One small difference while cleaning up the guard hole, on the MQ only, it has like a panel insulation that runs on the back side of the quarter panel here. So just make sure that you wear away enough of that you can get your pinch weld all the way on. Once you're done cleaning that up, just get some compressed air and a blowgun and just blow all the swarf out of the engine bay. So now that we're done cleaning up both guard holes, we're going to fit the pinch weld that's supplied in your kit. This is directional, so make sure it's pointing out. You'll leave your 8mm overlap to make sure that it pushes up tight, gives you that nice seamless finish. We'll then test fit the snorkel, see if there's any areas that you need to touch up or address, and then we're good to mark the pillar holes.
So like Morg said, guys, always cut this side of where you've started with the pinch weld. That way it'll bite in really nice when you go to join it up. So just give you a little demonstration on that. Just push that side down, bring that one up, push it in first, and then as you push that down, it bites in real nice and there'll be no gap in the pinch weld joint itself.
The main clear difference between these two snorkels, other than bend orientation, is just the spigot plate. So the position of where the 3-inch spigot goes to locate to the airbox is just in a different position. That's pretty much it.
Probably good to say that, because if you think that you can buy a second-hand MQ Triton snorkel off marketplace to fit it to your MR, you definitely can't. So don't do that.
Would not recommend. The bottom's got a slight gap, so I definitely need to take more out of the top to let it in more. So the main reason we test fit the snorkels is so that we can get the perfect end result and the perfect fit up around the snorkel. Why we test fit this with the pinch weld is so that we can show where's tight on the guard. So if it's tight in one section and it's got a slight gap in the other, you'll trim the tight section, 1 mil, 2 mil max.
At most, yeah.
And then you'll refit to make sure that those tight sections have allowed you to roll the snorkel into the template.
So you can see underneath, when we give the snorkel a little tweak, that it actually pulls the pinch weld up. That indicates that that's where it's tight. So we'll take a little bit more there. That'll close the gap up at the back and the snorkel will fit perfectly.
So what I usually do, we'll rock the snorkel back and forth so you can see where it's tight. I'll then mark right next to where there is a small amount of clearance so that we know where to trim.
I suppose the other thing to note is that the reason why we have to do this on snorkels like the Triton snorkel is because of the shape of the template itself. So with it being like a longer template with the contours of the guard on the Triton, there is a chance that you might have to take little bits out here or there to get the perfect fit up. This isn't really something that we would ever encounter on a PX Ranger or an N70 or an N80 short entry. It's a much smaller hole, a much flatter guard, so therefore there's much less chance of sort of any indiscrepancy when you cut it out. So if you have a template that's this sort of shape, Triton's 200 series, BT50, anything that's sort of semi-recessed will generally always do a very slight trim cut at the end before we paint the guard and final fit.
So once you've marked those sections to retrim, you can then move up to your pillar, mark out your pillar holes.
It's not a bad idea to get a mate to give you a hand to do this. He can hold the snorkel down the bottom. You can mark out the hole in the pillar.
Good to go, brother?
Yeah. So same again, we're just going to take a little bit more material in a couple of areas just to make sure that this snorkel fits perfectly. You good?
Yeah, brother.
Let's drill these bitches out. I'm sorry. I'm fucking sorry.
Shake me awake. Bring me back to reality. Head on my pillow. But I'm not getting any slave.
So now that we've done our final trim up, I'll blow the car down again and we'll prime all the guard holes, just making sure that we put something to back this hole here so you don't end up covering your whole engine bay with overspray. The reason why we'll prime now is so that it gives us time for that to dry before refitting the pinch weld while we're drilling the pillar holes. We're always using the Worth Zinc Rich primer. We find that this gives us the best results.
The world is waiting, where are you? Looking for a sign, we can't find you. Buried in the sands of passing time, with racing thoughts running through my mind. I see my future in black and white.
So another tool that we use pretty regularly here is the Worth step drill bit. The reason we use this bit is because it's much safer when you drill in the pillar. So it gradually steps up in size to make sure that way as you're drilling, you're not going to risk putting a pimple in the outside of the pillar. These are available from our website, so when you do purchase a snorkel online, you can also purchase a drill bit at the same time. So I also sort of use my hand like that just to brace myself, and I'll hold the drill against myself rather than like at arm's reach. You've got much less chance of fucking up drilling the pillar basically. Then once we've drilled the hole, we're going to go ahead and put a slight countersink on it, so that way the nutsert sits in nice and flush.
So next we use our countersink bit just to put a slight chamfer on these holes to allow the nutserts to sit dead flush with the pillar skin. That way then the bracket is actually resting against the skin of the car and not against the nutserts, causing them to rattle loose. So next we'll move on to nutserting the pillar. We choose to use the small flange nutserts just because we find they will sit flush. With the wide flange nutserts, they actually sit proud of the pillar, which will also cause that issue of them rattling loose and the snorkel only sitting against the nutserts and not the actual body of the car. It is worth mentioning while you're nutserting, just to make sure that your nutsert gun is dead flat to the pillar, so that you're not pulling the nutsert up on the piss.
The other thing that I always do while I'm putting nutserts in is to grab the countersunk bolts that you're going to use to attach the snorkel to the pillar and put them on the driver's side seat. That way when you go to refit the snorkel for the final time, you're not having to run back to the bench to grab your bolts, just saves you heaps of time. All right, so now you've got your nutserts in. Going to go ahead and pull the tape off and refit the pinch weld for the final time.
Bring me back to reality.
So one thing that can happen when you're refitting the pinch weld is that it ends up being short. Now, I honestly have no idea why, but it is pretty common. So if you do find that your pinch weld is short, just pull it back for, you know, a couple 100 mil, about a shucker's worth, and just sort of like stretch it out as you put it on, and that will give you the length back that you need. So with the Tritons, they are a little bit different to other cars that we work on. So with the Triton snorkel specifically, we refit the snorkel first, and then we'll put the airbox and all the joiners in second. It's just heaps easier on these, and it's probably the only car you can get away with doing that. All right, so now that you've refitted the snorkel, it's time to move on to modifying the airbox. So the next thing to do is to modify the airbox. You've got to pull the factory inlet piece out and rivet this billet aluminium piece in. To get the factory piece out, it's got like two little clips that stick out. I'll try and lever the bottom one up and then put pressure on the top and push it down while pulling this back out. Now this can be a real pain in the ass to do. So bend that up as much as possible, but just be very careful that you don't put too much pressure on it and break the bottom of the airbox out. And then as you push that one down and push backwards, and that way it'll just pop out for you. The other thing we do before putting silicone on is just to test fit the billet aluminium piece. So 1/8 drill bit, 1/8 rivets. Now you'll see that this billet aluminium piece has got like a bit of a lip there. When you fit that into the airbox, just make sure it goes the whole way home, because if you sort of end up, basically if you put that in there, it's not going to work. It has to be there for the snorkel kit to work and for the silicone joiner and everything to mate up. So push it the whole way in, and then we're just going to drill 2 holes in it, one either side. Shake all the sand out. All right, so now that we've done that, pull this back out. Morgs can chuck some silicone around it, and then we'll refit it, put the rivets in, and then it'll be good to put in the engine bay.
So we tend to use the Selly's roof and gutter because we find it works for our purpose, generally the best. It flows really nicely, and it doesn't dry too quick, so you're not rushing to try and get it back in the airbox.
And unlike some other silicons and Sikaflexes and stuff, it doesn't sort of spread out too far either. It's quite easy to work with and doesn't end up everywhere, hey?
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's you to rivet and then clean it.
So once you have siliconed it off, push it in, and you're just going to chuck some rivets in it.
There you go, brother.
Put a little bit in.
Yeah. So if you find once you put the aluminium piece in the airbox, you've still got a couple of tiny gaps, just fill those up with a bit of extra silicone and run a smooth bead around with your finger just to fill it up, make sure it's sealed.
So now that we've got the adapter all siliconed up and sealed into the airbox, we're going to go ahead and fit the silicone to the snorkel first, and then we're going to put the airbox back in. But I just sort of wanted to touch on the amount of sand that we've got out of the airbox. Now most of this was out of the Triton, the MQ rather, but I mean, short of doing water crossings, even if you do regular beach work, it's a good idea to have a snorkel because you do move the inlet point from down here all the way up here.
So first we'll put the silicone on. Always give it a healthy dose of lube just to make sure you're not gonna have any issues trying to get it on the airbox or on the snorkel spigot. So when you're putting the silicone in, just make sure you have the hose clamp loosely fitted and pointing to the top section. Because access is quite tight here, it gives you the best chance and the easiest place to essentially get your tool on to tighten up the hose clamp.
Easy access for your tool.
That's it.
I like it.
Before we refit the airbox, we'll fit the coolant overflow tank. Just because the space is quite tight, you won't get the bolts or the tank back in once the airbox is fitted.
Both Tritons have this trim piece, but with the MR, it's got these extra plastic clips that lock in. So when you put that in, just give it a bit of a bump with the back of your hand just to make it locate into those, the clips up the top before you put these two clips in here. So the last job left to do before you're finished up, guys, is to give it a quick clean, just to get all the fingerprints and all the crap off the snorkel in your car. We use this FW1 spray-on wax. It's cheap, it's easy. You can use any sort of car polish available to you. One thing to make sure of though is that if you do apply any polish to the powder coat, make sure that the snorkel is cool. If you've been doing this out in the sun, do not put any polish on it because it will mark the powder coat. We also use a brand new microfiber when we're doing this. The reason we specifically use a microfiber is because if you use a normal rag, you can risk scratching the powder coat. These are nice, they're soft, and if it's brand new, then you know it's not got any contamination in it.
So that was the MQ-MR install, guys. Both these kits come with comprehensive fitting instructions, everything included, and they're live on our website.
They also come in a day one variant, which is a cheaper, non-seamless, but made to the same quality that you'd expect from the Fabulous Fab variant. So if you want to order one today, jump on our website or give one of the girls in the office a call and they can get you sorted out. So make sure you subscribe and hit that bell because next Sunday night, we're going to have a new R&D car and you do not want to miss out on what we're going to be doing to that.
Like this.